Meeting come to order. First order of business is the agenda approval. I need a motion for that, please.
I'll make the motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded that the agenda be approved. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Report on closed session.
The board met in closed session on two items. The first is to confer with its real property negotiator with regard to a cell tower relocation, and no action was taken. Secondly, a conference with legal counsel regarding an existing condemnation action, the McRae condemnation, and settlement authority was granted to council.
Thank you, Jim. Public comment on matters not on the agenda. We have no request for speakers. Approval of the February the 16th, 2017 meeting minutes. I need a motion on that.
I'll move approval.
And I will second it.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Review of our monthly year-to-date revenue and expenses.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. This month is for January 2017, and for the month, the agency's starting position was $4.96 million. It was a big revenue month in January. We received $6.8 million in real estate true-up and $760,000 in expenses true-up from the state. We also received an advance of $4.96 million, which I'll identify on the last page when we finish the report. All total, we received $9 million of cash on hand for that month. On the expense side, it was kind of a quiet month. The most activity was in the Southport project, and most of that was the Tiger retention payment release. Expenses for the month totaled $397,000. The agency's on-hand position for Fund 870-871 was $12.9 million. On the first page, since we're starting to get into construction with the Southport project, we're starting to receive advances from the state. And because they're advances, they're not deemed as revenue earned, so we park those in a separate fund, 257. So you'll see that on the first page of the monthly report that we book $4.9 million in advance. So that brings the total resources, agency's resources for the month to $17.9 million. And that was for January 2017. We ended the month of February at $16.4 million, and we currently have another set of true-up payments and are developing the next big construction advance for DWR right now. So we should expect that to show up in the books around April or so. And that ends the monthly report.
Any questions?
Well, just for future reference in reading these things, you talked about the advance coming in, and it's not considered revenue until we actually bill against it. Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah, what'll happen is by the time we go and submit our next work plan, we'll either have actually spent that money or it'll diminish the next advance we'll get. So the next net advance will be whatever's remaining in that advance plus what we've asked, minus what we've asked for.
So that $4 million or $4.9 million, that will start showing up on state revenue as it's consumed.
Right. You'll see, what you'll see is that this amount in the advance fund will evolve as the number changes as we go forward. And the revenue we do earn will be siphoned over into Fund 870 and 871, primarily 871.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mark, would it be fair to say that as we use that money that's parked in 257 from the advance, that as we use it, it'll be booked as both revenue and expenses?
No, for the tracking purposes, because it's so fluid, we decided to wait as we get the next advance and do a one-time journal entry there to keep it clear for auditors and everybody, so people can track how the money flows rather than small flows. We did that during construction for the rivers and CHP projects, and it was complicated.
Good. Any more comments? Very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Keep the money coming. We have the consent agenda.
Mr. President, on the consent agenda, I would like to pull out item item 8 from the consent agenda so it can be addressed on a few specific items that Paul will bring up. So I would like to move for approval of consent items 6 and 7.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we agree to items 6 and 7 when pull out item number 8 for further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We're down to item number 8 of the consent agenda.
Good morning, man. Good morning, President, members of the board. I have an alternative resolution for your consideration this morning after having conversations with one of the board members and conversations then with our attorney and our Department of Finance and Yolo County Planning, who oversees the SMARA permit. So previously, on item 8 asked for your authority to enter into a to get the general manager the authority to enter into a surety bond for the reclamation plan that coincides with our borrow site. This is a requirement from the Department of Conservation. So, you know, we see all this as kind of a course of business. You just heard a report from Mr. Zolo on our cash balance, and we're very healthy right now when it comes to our financial resources, and foresee that that will continue on into the future, and therefore, the alternative that we're bringing to you today is rather than paying the money for a surety bond, is that we would actually set aside the money necessary for a financial assurance. This meets with the Department of Conservation's guidelines. This set-aside would be $1.1 million, just over $1.1 million, the full boat. It would have to remain there until we can prove to the Department of Conservation that the property is restored to its ag use in accordance with our reclamation plan. If the site is never touched, the contractor is looking at ways to, you know, that there may be a reason that they don't have to touch borrow one, then that money from that account will go right back into the general fund account or the construction account, the capital account for the flood program. So that's an alternative alternative resolution to you this morning and recommendation from staff, given that circumstances have changed since we first started negotiating for the surety bond. I'm here if you have any questions.
Questions?
No, I think that's a good strategy to have. I would encourage the staff to, though, continue to look at the surety bond. You know, I had some concerns about the cost of it, and I think it was because the folks that were going to be providing it were unclear as to, you know, our worthiness and those type of things. And I think if we continue to work with them and we do need to go with a surety bond, perhaps we can get it at a more favorable rate.
Sure.
So the resolution would be modified instead of authorization of purchase of a surety bond? Do we have to take a different kind of action to do the set-aside?
Yeah, so the modification would be that we would pledge flood assessment revenues, both from this one half from this fiscal year and one half from next fiscal year, is the way that the resolution reads.
Okay. And that saves the agency the cost of the surety bond,
Right.
essentially.
It saves the interest cost on the surety bond that we would have to maintain for a minimum of 2 years, probably more like 3.
Okay.
The downfall is that we will not have access to the $1.1 million for the period of time that it's set aside to provide the financial assurance.
And we don't have a need for that funding that we can see in this moment?
We believe that the budget can handle the set-aside, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just add that based on our cash flow modeling, with our current cash balance and our predictions for both state advance, state true-up, the most significant reimbursement from the state being from real estate. So now that that's rolling in, that's a significant lift for our cash position. So we anticipate that we will and the model shows that we would have a balance that could withstand the 1.1 set aside. But I would also offer up that if circumstances change, we could always switch gears and go to a surety bond to free up that cash.
And then I would add that we have the line of credit in place, too.
That could also
which-
back this
Which
up.
at this point is a less cost than the surety bond. So
Yep.
we'll see which way it goes.
It's a good solution.
Yeah. So I'll make a motion that we approve the resolution as changed, or
I'll second that, as amended.
Been moved and seconded that the resolution be approved as changed. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Next order of business is WSAFCA project updates.
Morning, President Denton and members of the board. I know you've received or at least most of you have received the progress report. So I'd just like to provide a couple of the items, or highlight a couple of items for discussion here. For the Southport project, I just want to remind the board, it's been some time, but we did an additional environmental impact report primarily based on the Borrow 1. We call it the subsequent EIR. It was certified by the board some time ago. Recently, the Corps was on board with providing a memo of record documenting from the NEPA side of things those changes to the project. More recently, they decided that a supplemental environmental assessment was required, for which they have developed, and as of either yesterday or the day before yesterday, they've finalized that and posted a public notice for 14 days on from the NEPA side of things, the changes to the project conditions, primarily the addition of Borrow 1 as a borrow source. So that public review period closes March 28. Really don't expect to have any comments, but they should be able to finalize that document end of the month. On the biological opinions, I reported out last month that due to the increased number of valley elderberry shrubs that were found along the project, we had to do an update to the biological assessment, which had to go to U.S. Fish and Wildlife for them to update the biological opinion. That is underway and should be wrapped up also by the end of the month. Those two, completion of those two things allows our 408 and 404 permits to be executed, so we can go to construction. So those are now on schedule for the end of the month. On real estate services, staff submitted a pretty good batch of appraisals and accounting packages to DWR for review and approval. Some of those are over $150,000 and require review and approval by Department of General Services. But again, we don't expect any significant delays, and hopefully that just moves through the system and we can get some reimbursements coming from that soon. And then also on relocation services, another big hurdle that staff, Paul, was able to accomplish was getting DWR approval of our relocation plan. So that now sets up the ability for DWR to reimburse for the cost of relocation services. So those packages will also be going to DWR for review and approval. On environmental support services, one last valley elderberry shrub, which was, I guess it was located or discovered last week, was relocated yesterday in consultation with the Corps and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Although outside of the normal transplant window, we still received approval, and I think it was a slightly higher mitigation ratio, but other than that, things moved along, and no delays to the BO update. Also, for environmental support services, GEI conducted their first environmental awareness training for the prime contractor and many of their subs. Staff also attended. There will be at least one, if not two more, environmental awareness trainings conducted as we near the heavy equipment rollout of an actual dirt moving construction later in the year. Let's see. Cultural resource inventory. I reported, well, maybe I didn't report the last meeting, but Between the last meeting and now, we've submitted a first phase inventory report to the Corps that has been reviewed and approved and sent to the SHPO. Their 30-day review period is up next week. We've received some initial feedback from SHPO that all in all, it's a good report. They do want to wait to see if there are any significant comments provided by any tribes before rendering their final opinion. So next week's going to be a big week for that. Getting the approval from both the SHPO and the Corps on that inventory report is critical for us being able to start moving dirt out there. And then for project activities, if you drive around out there, you may see some activity that the contractor has been doing. We have installation of silt fence and project boundaries. We have some tree and shrub removal that started this week. And whether this week or next, but certainly in the coming weeks, the contract will be doing borings for mix design for the slurry wall mix. And as Paul had mentioned, the contractor is also exploring some adjacent areas for borrow material in lieu of using borrow one. So they'll be going through an analysis both on the contractor side and WSAFCA side to see if that is a cost-effective, change in borrow and whether or not we'll approve that. So more to come on that. On the WSAC GRR, or the federal project, so now that the project's been congressionally authorized through Order 16 and the WIN Act, that our focus now is working towards getting federal appropriations so we can get to construction. So the first bit of work now is working with the Army Corps of Engineers through their normal work plan budget to get PED money, preliminary engineering and design, for the WSAC project. So the Corps is anticipating requesting a budget allocation in fiscal years 18 and 19 of about $4 million. We are providing that information to our Matsui and Garamendi, our representatives, for the House budget that they're preparing. So that information is getting back to DC to support the Corps' request for PED funds. But the biggest hurdle is getting federal appropriations for construction. And our project right now would be considered a new start. Not that many new starts are authorized each year. The list of new starts is growing. And so it's going to be a lot of work by us and really others in the region. We're going to be competing with others in the region as well for new starts status and approval for funding. Some intel in the community is Matsui is exploring an option that would not have us marked with a new start status, having our project be considered an ongoing project. And we're working with her staff to see if we can make that happen. If we can make that happen, it's a big deal. But we need to have a backup strategy in case it doesn't.
Greg, can I make a few comments on
Sure.
that, if you want? It's very good. It sounds like we're staying focused on the issues at hand back there. But, with the fact that we accomplished the authorization, in the last Congress, and now the focus now is more on appropriations and, getting budgets and getting in with the program and different factors there at the core. I'm wondering if it's a time for us. We've had a relationship with a lobbying firm back there in conjunction with the city of Sacramento that has, served us well over time. But whether we should look at a more, see if there's other resources there that can be more focused on what WSAFCA's needs are right now. And, I'd like to see what my other members think, but to have possibly direct staff to have some conversations with the city, see what their interests are to possibly look at other resources, and based on that, either with them or on our own, maybe look at what other possibilities there may be back there to help us in Washington on the federal effort. So.
Sure, yeah. I think that's an excellent idea, as we really need all hands on deck with very experienced people back in DC to help us navigate through this new start issue, which is likely going to be the case. Getting around the New Start's a pretty, maybe a steeper climb than getting through New Start.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm understood.
Yeah, and then, our relationship with the other flood agencies around here, we need to work together, but we're competing as well. So we need to be able to, hold our own. So I don't know if it's been, I've been back there, for several years now on the cap to cap and on other issues as well. And it's important to have, everyone knocks lobbyists, but, they provide a good service if you have the right one and they're looking out for your interests, so. Do you guys have any, do you think that's a good idea to do?
Excellent idea.
Okay, so consider you're directed.
All right, I've been so directed. One last thing on the federal project, what also factors into New Start authorization is the benefit cost ratio that a project has. And, we have a kind of a unique, at least one unique circumstance with our federal project, and that is we're implementing, the first increment of that federal project with the Southport project. Of the total $1.2 billion federal project, the Southport represents about $400 million in terms of the federal estimate and cost. So once that project's taken down, what remains, and we're implementing it at roughly half that cost, roughly $200 million. So there's an opportunity anyways to reevaluate the benefit cost ratio and have ours be more favorable. So one of the strategies that we're going to employ and try and work with the Corps on is how and when do we solicit the Corps to look at redoing the economics, reevaluating the economics, and recalculating our BC ratio, ideally for more beneficial BC ratio that might give us a leg up or help us move up the ladder on the list of new starts. So we'll be exploring those options as well. And then lastly, I just want to provide an update. Staff here at the city has formed a community rating system team. As you recall, we've reported about our community rating system. Our number moved from a rating number of 8 to a rating number of 6, moving us to the next tier of discount on flood insurance from a 5% to a 10% reduction. And the staff is continuing to work to provide more information to the folks back east to get us a better rating. So by the end of the month, by the end of April, some more submissions will be made, as well as staff is looking at forming a program for public information, otherwise known as a PPI, which involves members of the community, as well as staff, to work on public outreach activities. And that will also not only help get the message out, but it helps enhance our scoring so we can, progressively move from 6 to a 5 to a 4 and so forth. And one other update on when we're looking for having the groundbreaking ceremony for the Southport project. We were targeting April, likely when the contractor would be out doing major construction activities. But field conditions are such that now the contractor's expecting that it will be mid-May before they get out to do much earthwork. We're going to continue to monitor field conditions and continue to talk with the contractor, but right now we're targeting 3rd, 4th week in May as the target for our groundbreaking ceremony. And I've reached out to Congresswoman Matsui, who's very interested in attending when we thought we were doing it in the fall. So I'm reaching out to her staff to see if she's available in May, and we'll try and work around her schedule, but we'd love to have her come out. And she's been a big advocate for the project. She was instrumental in participation back in DC for our approval of our federal project. So I know it's a big deal for her, it's a big deal for us. We'd love to have her. So we'll keep you posted. And that concludes my updates.
Let's talk about the cross levy for a moment. When this is done, we have 10 miles that's affected by us. Is that correct? Our sphere of influence goes down the river?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it goes down 10 miles, but it did go below the, along the Sacramento River, it did go below the city limits. Now that the South Cross levee has been accepted by the Corps as providing hydraulic separation, the basins have actually been redefined. And so our system no longer has Sacramento River levees south of the city limit. Now, we still have, on the west side, we still have Deepwater Ship Channel West levee that goes far below the city limits. But along the Sacramento River, because of the South Cross levee, we no longer have those additional miles.
So when we finish the work that we're going to do on the ship channel and the port area, that will relieve us of that responsibility below our city limits there?
No, as a matter of fact, because that's part of the federal project, as soon as they touch those levees to improve them, they become our burden for O&M for 20-some-odd miles. So an
20 miles?
Yes. So an alternative solution, so bear with me. We are all very aware, and evidently you are now too, of the responsibility if we keep the Deepwater Ship Channel West levee as part of our system. So a way around that, we'd have to provide an alternative solution to provide flood protection to the interior of the port through some type of operable gate or some other mechanism. That is not lost on staff. It has not been publicly talked about much because we didn't want to disrupt or otherwise interfere with our federal project authorization. But now that it's been authorized, we are exploring with our state partners and others the possibility of introducing a different solution other than improving all those miles of levee. So it certainly would be advantageous to WSAFCA. It would certainly be advantageous to the flood protection for the city. And it's part of our mission is to redo the solution for that side of the system. So we're committed to finding a less expensive and better solution than the Deepwater Ship Channel West.
In the meantime, any maintenance work that we do on that Deepwater Channel, or the Corps does it?
So, yeah, the Corps does. Right now, it's a navigation levee. It's under the Corps' navigation division. Staff will be meeting with the Corps navigation folks in the near future to talk about levee maintenance, especially following this past, well, we're still in winter, but these previous storms, which have caused some erosion, as you're probably aware of, on the Deepwater Ship Channel West levee along the bypass. So we plan to meet with Corps Navigation to discuss maintenance of those levees in advance of the next winter season. But WSAFCA is not responsible unless and until the Corps improves those levees as part of a federal project. Once that happens, then WSAFCA is then on the hook for OMRR&R, like we are with all the rest of the levees. But until that time, it's still a navigation levee and under Corps navigation responsibility for maintenance.
Anything else?
No.
Nothing else? Meeting's adjourned.